Dear God, give us the courage to choose love, even when it costs us everything. Give us the strength to walk alone, if walking away protects our peace. Let the ones who misjudged us see not our anger, but our endurance. And when the tables turn, let us respond with grace, not pride. Amen. The hospital lobby was too quiet for Lara to breathe easily. Through the wide glass wall, she could see them, her parents. Her mother held her handbag tightly to her chest like it could protect her from guilt. Her father sat slumped in a wheelchair, eyes closed, face pale and sunken. They looked smaller, not physically, spiritually. They were waiting for her husband, the man they once swore would ruin her. Lara stood frozen. She hadn't seen them in almost a decade, not in photos, not in passing, not at all. They hadn't reached out when she moved, not when she was promoted, not when she buried her first pregnancy. But today, they showed up, desperate, tired, wordless. Behind her, nurses passed quickly, speaking in hushed tones. A receptionist tapped at a keyboard. Somewhere down the hall, Dr. Donald Jr. was in surgery, saving her father's life, without hesitation, without condition. Lara didn't move, not yet, because sometimes it takes a moment for silence to finish what rejection started. She was 26 when her father pointed to the door and said the words that would echo for years. If you leave with him, don't come back. Lara stood still, suitcase in one hand, heart in the other. Her mother wouldn't meet her eyes. Her uncles sat rigid, backs stiff, like someone had died. Except no one had. Not yet. They were just burying the version of her they once knew. Donald had parked outside, engine off, waiting, not rushing, never rushing her. You're choosing money, one uncle snapped. No, Lara said quietly. I'm choosing peace. The room tensed. Her cousin sniffed back tears. Someone muttered a prayer under their breath, as if she were cursed. As if marrying a wealthy man from another world meant she'd sold her roots. Her aunt spoke last. You think love protects you from reality? Lara didn't answer. She didn't scream. She didn't explain. She walked out, knowing they wouldn't follow. That was the last time she saw them together. The door closed behind her, like a decision no one was ready to admit was permanent. They once called her marriage a betrayal. Now they were sitting in a hospital she helped build, praying the man they rejected would keep her father alive. Have you ever been punished for choosing love over family approval? Have you ever walked away, not because you stopped loving them, but because you started loving yourself enough to stop begging? Lara gave them everything. Her time, her loyalty, her patience. She asked for support. They gave her silence. She asked for understanding. They gave her ultimatums. Now they needed what only her love had built. And they had to sit in that truth, fully awake, painfully aware. So, what happens when time changes the table? When the same door you slammed is the only one that can open hope? Do you knock? Do you wait? And does the one behind it have to answer? Lara didn't move yet. She let the silence stretch, not out of pride, but memory. Some doors open quietly. Some never should have been closed in the first place. Lara finally stepped forward, not because they earned her grace, but because she knew what it cost to withhold it. Her heels clicked softly across the polished floor. She walked past nurses, past doubt, past everything they once said about her. Her mother looked up first. Tears welled. Her father tried to rise but winced. He looked older than she remembered. Smaller too, not because of illness, but because regret humbles without asking. No one spoke right away. No one needed to. The shame was loud enough. Still, Lara didn't fold. She stood tall, the same woman they tried to warn her never to become. She whispered, more to herself than to them, "You didn't break me. You just gave me space to become." Her mother cried. Her father blinked fast, swallowing everything pride wouldn't let him say. And in the room behind them, Donald operated with steady hands, saving the man who once feared him. Have you ever had to walk alone for what you believed? Have you ever forgiven someone without forgetting the cost? Comment below with your truth. Like this video, so Lara's story reaches someone who needs it. Subscribe to Mr. Victor Storytime for more stories that don't end with shame, but strength. The sun in Lara Matthews' hometown didn't rise with urgency. It stretched itself across the farmland like it had all day. Life there moved by rhythm, not rush. Her family owned a few acres on the edge of the county, enough to live, not to grow. Mornings began before birds even stirred. Her father walked the land with boots worn from the same routes taken by his father before him. Her mother prepared food with the same methods passed down by memory, not recipes. They didn't question the way things were, but Lara did. She wasn't disrespectful. She was curious. She read books past bedtime, tucked under covers with a flashlight she hid from her cousins. She asked about the world outside, the one beyond the land, and the church, and the Sunday fish fries. She wondered why no one ever left for good. Why girls with ambition always came back quieter, smaller. Why love had to be earned through suffering. Her community loved her. They didn't always understand her. By 12, Lara was writing essays that made her teachers pause. By 16, she volunteered at the local health clinic, asking more questions than the nurse supervisor liked. She wasn't trying to show off. She just wanted to know why the town had to stay sick and stuck while the world moved forward. Her grandfather, before he passed, once told her, "You think different, baby. That's gone, make life hard, but honest." He wasn't wrong. And honesty cost her early. By her early 20s, Lara had finished her degree in public health from a modest state college and returned home briefly. She planned to take a short break, reconnect, and decide on her next step. Instead, she found herself pulled into a community outreach program, a partnership between rural clinics and regional hospitals. That was where she met him. Donald Jr. didn't walk into the community center like someone important. He arrived 10 minutes early, parked in the back, and helped carry in supply boxes before most volunteers even showed up. Tall, clean-cut and reserved, he didn't lead with his title. He didn't mention his background. He introduced himself as Don and got to work. Lara noticed the way he treated everyone, gently, evenly, whether they were patients or janitors. When a child started crying during a blood draw, Donald didn't dismiss it. He knelt. He spoke softly. He waited. They crossed paths a dozen times that day, exchanged names, quick glances, short jokes. But it wasn't until after they'd packed up and Lara offered him a bottle of water that they spoke like people, not professionals. "You always volunteer this far from your hospital?" she asked, wiping sweat from her neck. Donald smiled. "I go where the need is, and where the people teach me something." Lara tilted her head. "You think we're here to teach you? I think you already are." There was no flirtation, no charm, just sincerity. It disarmed her. Over the next few weeks, the outreach continued. They shared car rides to nearby clinics. They talked between patient files. He asked about her work in community advocacy, about her town, about her late grandfather. He didn't pity her upbringing. He respected it. And when he spoke about his own family, a long line of surgeons, a father who ran one of the largest private hospitals in the state, he did so with a tone that wasn't boastful, only factual. Lara learned quickly that Donald came from wealth, old money, legacy schools, private equity networks, but he never used it to impress her. He never used it to hide, either. He showed up on time. He asked thoughtful questions. He remembered details. She found herself looking forward to the end of the day, not for rest, but for the talks they'd share on the drive back. One evening, after a long shift, they sat in his car for over an hour, windows down, sharing leftover snacks. She told him about the land her family held onto for generations. He told her about the pressure of carrying a name with expectations. When she laughed about how hard her aunties would stare if they saw her even sitting beside a man like him, he didn't flinch. He said, "I'd like to meet them someday. If they'll have me." The feeling was quiet, but certain. Safe. Solid. Slow. He wasn't trying to sweep her off her feet. He wanted to walk beside her. By the time Donald asked Lara to marry him, it wasn't with flash or spectacle. No violin, no rooftop, just a walk after dinner and a simple ring handed over with both of his. "I won't promise you ease," he said, "but I'll give you effort. Every day." She said yes before he could even finish the next sentence. The celebration was soft, close friends, warm smiles, nothing excessive. But that joy ended the moment she told her family. The rejection came fast and clear. Her father didn't want to hear his name. Her uncles questioned Donald's motives. Her aunts worried she would be judged, pitied, discarded. "You think love's enough to make you equal in his world?" one uncle asked. "He doesn't look at me like I'm less," Lara answered. Her mother's silence was worse than their words. Then came the ultimatum. "You leave with him. Don't come back." She left. Not out of spite, out of peace. And she carried with her a love that wasn't loud, but unshakable. Lara stood by the back door of her childhood home, fingers grazing the frame she used to lean against as a girl. The sun had already dipped low, and inside the living room, the mood had soured into something thick and heavy. Her father stood at the center of the room, surrounded by her uncles, men whose voices carried weight because they'd never been questioned. "You're choosing comfort," one uncle said, tone clipped. "You're choosing status over substance," added another. "No," Lara replied calmly. "I'm choosing the person who respects me. You think his world will ever truly accept you?" Her father cut in. "You think his people will welcome you when they find out where you come from?" Lara's heart didn't race, her voice didn't shake. "They already have." That was when the final line came down. "If you leave with him, don't come back." Her mother didn't stop it. Her aunts, silent in the corner, didn't soften it. They had made their choice. Not for Lara's happiness, but for their pride. Lara stepped outside that evening with nothing more than a small bag and a quiet heart. The land she was raised on didn't cling to her feet, it released her. Donald waited in the car at the edge of the driveway, engine off, hands folded over the steering wheel. He didn't ask what they said. He didn't push her to talk. He simply asked, "Are you sure?" She nodded once. "I've never been more sure of anything." They married 6 weeks later. It wasn't in a ballroom, no string quartet, no expensive show, just a small garden behind Donald's apartment building, decorated by friends who insisted love didn't need approval to be sacred. Lara wore a soft cream dress, borrowed earrings, and her late grandfather's watch tucked in her purse. Donald wore a simple navy suit and the quiet expression of a man who knew what mattered. Donald's parents came early. His mother helped arrange the chairs. His father poured lemonade into cups. They didn't ask questions about Lara's past. They only asked what she wanted from her future. When Lara walked down that modest aisle, there was no music, no clapping, only presence. And when they exchanged vows, there was no hesitation. After the ceremony, Donald's mother took Lara's hands. "You don't owe us anything but honesty," she said. "You're family now. The rest will come." It was the kindest welcome Lara had ever received. Life in the city didn't offer her a honeymoon. The buildings stretched tall and unfamiliar. The pace moved faster than memory could catch. And the people, polished, quiet, professionally distant, rarely looked like her. It wasn't hostility. It was disinterest. The kind that stings because it makes you feel invisible. Donald was busy. His residency was brutal. Overnight shifts, bleary mornings, missed meals. He'd come home smelling like antiseptic and exhaustion. But he still greeted her with soft eyes and stayed awake long enough to hear her talk about her day. Lara tried to blend in, but she refused to disappear. She quickly noticed the difference in how people spoke to Donald versus how they looked at her. In corporate gatherings, she became the wife with no assumption of credentials. In charity events, she was either applauded for being his opposite or pitied for being his contrast. One evening, at a fundraising dinner, someone asked if she was the planner. "I work in public health," Lara replied, evenly. They smiled as if they hadn't heard her. She didn't flinch. She didn't shrink. She stopped attending those events altogether. Instead, she found herself again in smaller places, Black-owned cafes, community meetings, local churches. In those spaces, she was never the outsider. She was Lara. She was enough. She didn't wait for a big opportunity. She created one. Lara took a position at a nearby clinic, underfunded but vital. The staff was small, the resources were tight, but the mission was clear: serve people who were often left behind. She started by organizing patient data, then moved into community education, then grant writing. Within months, she became the one administrators leaned on when decisions had to be made under pressure. She didn't lead with her marriage. She didn't use Donald's name to unlock doors. She used her own work to open them. At home, Donald supported her without fanfare. He celebrated her quiet wins, stayed out of her way when she needed focus, and reminded her, when she doubted, that leaving home didn't mean she lost it. One night, over takeout and stacked paperwork, Lara looked at him and said, "I don't miss them the way I thought I would." He nodded. That's grief. Learning how to breathe. They didn't speak about her family often. The wound hadn't closed, but it wasn't bleeding anymore. What Lara built in the city wasn't luxury. It was independence. It was purpose. And while the price had been steep, she'd never once wished for a refund. The first year of Donald's residency nearly broke them. He left the apartment before sunrise, sometimes before Lara even opened her eyes. He returned past midnight, eyes red, posture bent, stomach empty. There were nights he sat in the shower too long, not to wash but to reset. He was gifted, but the pressure didn't care. Lara became his steadiness. She packed lunch even when he forgot to eat, left notes in his coat pocket with reminders like, "Breathe twice before answering," or "You are not your last patient." She kept track of birthdays he missed, bills he forgot, and laundry that piled up faster than time. When he lost a child on the operating table for the first time, he came home and said nothing. He dropped his bag, pulled her into his arms, and stood there without moving. She let him. No words, just stillness. She knew her presence couldn't erase the burden, but it could give it a place to rest. When she got home from her own work at the clinic, she didn't complain about being overlooked or the days she felt invisible. She saved that honesty for the moments when his eyes weren't heavy and his mind wasn't crowded with scans and scalpels. They didn't take vacations. They didn't go out. They built a home that felt safe even in exhaustion. Some nights, all they shared was tea in silence and the knowledge that they were still choosing each other. It wasn't romance written in grand gestures. It was love spelled in patience, and Lara carried more of it than most women her age were ever taught to hold. Still, love didn't shield her from the cold glances. In many of the spaces Donald had to navigate, fundraisers, networking events, hospital galas, Lara was noticed but not always seen. She stood beside him, poised, intelligent, dressed with quiet grace. But she often felt like she was being scanned, not acknowledged. She remembered one gala vividly. A senior board member's wife leaned in, gave Lara a polished smile, and said, "I didn't expect Don to marry someone so grounded. You must be a great balance for him." Lara smiled back. "Balance isn't about background. It's about respect." The woman blinked twice, then looked away. In another setting, she overheard someone ask Donald if she understood his world. Donald simply responded, "She defines it with me." He never let comments slide without correction. He didn't over-defend. He redirected, but Lara felt the sting even when words weren't sharp. It was in the tone, the hesitation, the way people assumed she was either too simple or somehow a symbol. Still, she didn't argue to belong. She wasn't raised to beg for seats at tables that questioned her worth. She found other tables. The city held corners where Lara didn't have to explain herself. She found a small natural hair salon on the east side, tucked between a laundromat and a barber shop. The first time she walked in, the scent of shea butter and mint oil greeted her like an old friend. The owner, a woman named Amina, welcomed her like family. Within weeks, Lara became a regular, not just for hair, but for conversation. The salon buzzed with real talk. Women of all ages shared advice, corrected each other with love, and laughed like they hadn't bled the night before. Through Amina, she found a local church that ran health drives and youth mentorships. She volunteered on Saturdays, handing out vitamins and checking in on elders who hadn't seen doctors in months. At a non-profit event focused on maternal health, Lara met two other women in healthcare who shared her passion for access and equity. They started meeting once a month for dinner. No titles, no competition, just strategy and sisterhood. Lara built her own world, one that wasn't tied to Donald's but didn't exclude him. He noticed. "You seem lighter," he said one evening while she folded laundry. She looked up. "I stopped trying to fit in where I wasn't meant to. I found my people." He nodded slowly. "I'm proud of you." She smiled. "I know." Their apartment wasn't in a high-rise. It didn't need skyline views. But it was theirs. The walls held memories of burnt dinners, first paychecks, and late-night disagreements that always ended with one of them apologizing before the other asked. They didn't try to outdo each other. They shared responsibilities. When Lara had a presentation for a city grant, Donald cleared his evening to review her slides. When Donald was up for a research fellowship, Lara stayed up 2 nights helping him reframe his proposal. They moved like a team, not a couple trying to impress, but a partnership trying to last. He didn't praise her in public for show. He respected her in private without pause. She didn't parade their relationship online, but she guarded it fiercely in real life. On weekends, they sometimes did nothing but rest. They'd sit with books, music low, phones face down. There was no performance. No pretending. They had nothing to prove to anyone but each other. When Donald received news he'd be considered for a hospital leadership program, Lara didn't jump. She asked, "Will it cost your peace?" He answered, "Not if you're in it with me." Their love was not loud. It was layered. It was lived. And it was built like a house with deep roots. Not perfect, but unshakable. The land Lara grew up on had always demanded respect. It wasn't generous. It didn't forgive laziness. But for decades, it had provided just enough for her family to survive. Corn one season, soy the next, a few cows when feed prices allowed. The land never made them rich, but it gave them identity. It gave them reason. Then the seasons changed. The rains came late. Then not at all. Soil cracked open in places Lara used to play as a child. Crops that once stood tall bent early, then failed outright. Her father worked longer hours for less return. Equipment repairs cost more than harvests brought in. Bills stacked quietly at first, then loudly. Medical debt followed not long after. Her father's knees worsened from years of labor. Her mother developed high blood pressure but delayed treatment because appointments meant time away from the farm. Prescriptions went unfilled. Pride filled the gaps where help should have been. Neighbors noticed. They talked in low tones at church, at feed stores, at Sunday dinners. "Times are hard for the Matthews," someone would say. "They'll manage," another replied. "They always do." But managing became heavier each year. Lara wasn't there to see it. She didn't hear the machine stall. She didn't watch her father sit at the kitchen table late into the night, staring at unpaid notices. She didn't know her mother had started cutting pills in half to stretch refills. What she once called home was drying up, season by season. Her name came up without invitation. At first it was small talk. Someone mentioned seeing her in a regional newsletter. Another heard she worked with a major clinic in the city. "She married that doctor, right?" "Yeah, the one from Money." The words carried weight, curiosity, judgment, regret they refused to name. A cousin mentioned Lara at a family gathering she hadn't been invited to. "I heard she runs programs now, helps people get care." Her uncle scoffed. City life changes people. But later that same uncle asked quietly, "You think she knows people who could help with grants?" No one answered him. The whispers grew louder as time passed. Someone mentioned Donald's name appearing on a hospital wing. Another heard Lara speak at a conference on community health. The contrast became harder to ignore. Lara's life sounded fuller. Their days felt thinner. Still, no one called her. Her mother would sometimes pause when her phone buzzed, hoping. Then she'd put it down, disappointed in herself for expecting anything. She made her choice, her father would say whenever Lara's name surfaced, and the conversation would end. But silence didn't erase awareness, it only made it heavier. Pride is not loud. It sits quietly and convinces people they're right. Her family carried theirs carefully. They told themselves they were protecting dignity. They reminded each other of how Lara left, how she chose a man from another world, how she didn't fight harder to stay. They ignored the part where they pushed her out. Each year that passed hardened their position, not because they were sure, but because admitting error felt worse than staying distant. Her father refused help from extended relatives. He took out small loans he didn't mention. Her mother skipped gatherings where questions might surface. They wore strength like armor, even as it cut into them. Bitterness crept in quietly. It showed in how her aunts spoke about success, in how her uncles mocked city life, in how no one said Lara's name unless necessary. They told themselves they were fine. But fine didn't pay medical bills. Fine didn't restore the land. Fine didn't stop the nights from growing longer. Lara sensed the shift, long before she understood it. She noticed when calls from old neighbors stopped altogether, when holiday cards came less frequently, when even distant relatives went silent. She didn't push, she didn't reach out. Not because she didn't care, because she remembered the cost of crossing boundaries. Donald noticed her quiet moments. "You've been distant lately," he said one evening as they sat together, paperwork spread across the table. "I feel it," she replied. "Something's wrong back home." He didn't suggest calling. He didn't offer solutions. He respected what she carried. "I'll be here," he said. "Whatever you decide." Lara appreciated that more than advice. She checked local news occasionally, read updates about agricultural aid, followed funding changes that affected rural clinics. She noticed how her town's name appeared more often in reports about declining resources. She never shared those links. Her boundaries weren't punishment, they were protection. She had learned the difference. One afternoon, while leaving the clinic, Lara overheard two colleagues talking. "Did you hear about Dr. Junior's wife?" One said. "She's leading that community grant program." Lara paused, surprised. "They say she's from a farming town originally. It's wild how far she's come." She kept walking, head held steady. Back home, her family heard similar things, never directly, always through someone else. Each piece of news landed differently now. It didn't spark anger anymore. It stirred reflection. Her mother once stood at the sink, staring out at the fields and whispered. She always wanted more. Her father didn't respond, because somewhere deep down, he knew wanting more wasn't betrayal. It was vision. Time passed unevenly. Lara's work expanded. She moved into leadership roles. She trained others. She became known for building bridges between clinics and underserved communities. She did all of it without looking back. Her family remained rooted where the land no longer gave what it once did. The distance between them wasn't measured in miles anymore. It was measured in growth. And while Lara didn't know it yet, the same pride that kept them silent would soon force them to face a truth they could no longer avoid. For now, she stayed quiet, not because she forgot where she came from, but because she finally understood she wasn't meant to shrink to return. Lara's father had always been strong in quiet ways. He didn't talk about pain, he worked through it. He didn't complain about his body failing him, he adjusted. Years of labor had taught him how to ignore warning signs until they demanded attention. That morning, he rose before dawn as usual, pulled on his boots, and stepped outside to check the fields that no longer answered his effort. The sun had barely climbed when it happened. He felt it first in his chest, a tightness he mistook for fatigue. He leaned against the fence, breathing slowly, waiting for it to pass. When it didn't, he tried to walk. His legs gave way before he could take 3 steps. His mother was the one who found him. She screamed his name across the yard, voice breaking through the still air. Neighbors came running. Someone called for an ambulance that took too long to arrive. At the local clinic, the staff worked quickly but with limited tools. Blood pressure readings spiked. Heart rhythms confused the monitors. The doctor on call did what he could, but his expression never softened. "We're going to stabilize him," he said. "But this is beyond what we can handle here." They transferred him to the nearest regional hospital. The drive felt endless. His breathing grew shallow. His eyes fluttered open and closed, struggling to focus. Tests followed, then more tests. And still no clear answers. "He needs advanced care," one doctor admitted. "Specialists, equipment we don't have." The word transfer hung heavy in the room. His wife nodded, hands shaking. Her children exchanged looks they didn't understand yet. For the first time, strength didn't feel like enough. The family waited in the hallway long after visiting hours ended. A family friend named Mrs. Collins arrived late that night, breathless from worry. She had known Lara's parents for decades. She listened carefully as the doctors explained the limits they'd reached. She hesitated before speaking. "There's a clinic in the city," she said softly. "One of the best." Her words landed slowly. "City?" Lara's mother echoed. "We can't afford that." Mrs. Collins shook her head. "They have programs, specialists. And the lead physician there, he's known for cases like this." She paused. "Donald Jr." Silence followed. The name didn't need explanation. It carried years of memory, fear, pride, regret. Her father shifted slightly on the bed, unaware of the storm his name had stirred. Her mother looked down at her hands. "That's..." Her husband. No one corrected her. They all knew. Mrs. Collins lowered her voice. "I know what happened. I know things ended badly. But this isn't about old words. It's about saving his life." The room stayed quiet. Her father had once said he'd rather struggle than accept help tied to that name. He wasn't awake now to repeat it. The decision sat with them. They left before dawn. The drive to the city felt longer than any distance they'd ever traveled. Highways replaced back roads. Buildings grew taller with every mile. Traffic hummed in patterns unfamiliar to them. Her mother stared out the window, gripping her purse. Her siblings sat stiffly, thoughts unspoken. When the hospital finally came into view, it rose clean and modern, glass catching the morning light. The name on the building was clear, Junior Medical Center. Below it, smaller letters read, "Advanced Care, Community Commitment." No one spoke. Her mother swallowed hard. "This is where she lives now," she said quietly. They parked, wheeled her father through automatic doors, and stepped into a world that moved faster than their breath. Staff spoke with precision. Forms were filled. Vitals were checked. The process was smooth, practiced, too practiced. Her father was taken in immediately. They were asked to wait. Lara didn't know they were coming. She was reviewing patient data at her clinic when her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number appeared. "They're here." That was all it said. Her heart stopped. She stood too quickly, chair scraping back. She didn't call. She didn't ask questions. She already knew. The drive to the hospital blurred. Every red light felt like a test she didn't have time to pass. When she stepped into the lobby, she saw them instantly. Her mother sat hunched forward, eyes fixed on the floor. Her siblings stood nearby, hands clasped, voices low. And in the center of it all, her father's empty wheelchair waited against the wall. They looked older than she remembered, smaller. She didn't approach right away. She stood behind a column, watching. This was the moment she'd never planned for, the collision of past and present, the weight of everything unsaid. Donald was in surgery. She knew because his name appeared on the board beside the operating room number. He was already helping. The air felt tight in her chest as she stepped forward. Her mother looked up first. Their eyes met. No words passed between them yet. No apology, no accusation, just recognition. Lara stopped a few steps away. She had imagined this moment in fragments over the years. None of them matched the reality. Her mother's lips trembled. Her siblings looked down, unsure. The woman who once watched her leave without stopping her now looked like she wanted to reach out, but didn't know if she had the right. Lara stayed still. This wasn't reunion. It was reckoning. Behind the doors, Donald worked with steady hands, unaware of the silence unfolding just feet away. And in that pause, everything that had been avoided for years finally stood face to face. If this were you, would you stop to help? Or would you let them face what they once gave you? Take a moment. Comment below with what you'd choose. The room felt too white, too bright, too still. Lara stepped through the doorway slowly, unsure if she was entering as a daughter or a stranger. The waiting area had gone quiet, except for the soft wheeze of the air vent and the distant rhythm of machines through closed doors. Her mother sat on the edge of the chair, shoulders curved inward, eyes swollen. The scarf tied around her head looked like it had been knotted in a hurry. Her hands clutched a tissue that was already damp and shredded. When she saw Lara step in, she didn't rise. She cried. Not loud, not theatrical, but the kind of cry that folds into the body like regret pressing against bone. Her eyes met Lara's, then fell. Her mouth opened, but no sound came. The same lips that once said, "Don't come back now," couldn't form a single word. Lara's father lay still on the hospital bed, face pale, lips dry, one arm connected to a slow dripping fore. His breathing was shallow but steady. His chest rose and fell like he was listening even in sleep. He didn't speak either. Couldn't. But the weight in the room didn't need a voice. The moment carried everything they never said. No one apologized. There were no speeches, no explanations, no reaching for excuses to cover the years gone. The space between them held too much history to be swept away with a single sentence. Lara didn't sit. She didn't move farther in. She stood with one hand holding the edge of the doorway, the other clenched at her side. Her face didn't betray anything. Not hurt, not anger, just stillness. Her mother rose slowly, hands trembling, but stopped midway, like she remembered too late that some lines don't erase easily. Her eyes pleaded. Her shoulders sagged. This wasn't the mother who had once spoken with authority, who had watched her daughter walk away without softening. This was a woman who hadn't known how deep silence could cut until it echoed back. Her brother stood in the corner, stiff, pretending to check his phone. Her sister stared at the pump, like the numbers on it might answer what none of them could say out loud. Pride had brought them this far. Now it left them empty in a room they had no control over. Lara didn't speak, not yet. Her presence was enough, for now, and in the middle of that silence she remembered. The last day she stood in her family's living room. Her bag had already been zipped. Her heart was louder than her footsteps, but she didn't flinch. Her father wouldn't look at her. Her uncles folded their arms. Her mother stood between the couch and the front door like she was guarding something. They said things they thought were final. You're turning your back on your own blood. You'll regret this when his people turn on you. You think his love will protect you from the world. But Lara hadn't answered, because no answer would have been enough. They weren't asking out of concern. They were protecting their fear. She remembered gripping the doorknob with fingers that trembled just once. And then she walked out. No one followed. No one called. And yet, here they were, in a room built by the man they once believed would break her, in a clinic born from the very life they rejected, surrounded by the consequences of the silence they upheld. That day had closed a door. This one hadn't opened it yet. The door to the operating hallway opened gently. Donald stepped in, pulling off his gloves, surgical cap tucked in one hand. He hadn't expected company, not this kind. He looked at the room, his eyes scanning every face. Then he saw Lara. She was still standing. He walked toward her slowly, not because he was uncertain, but because he saw it on her face. The quiet resistance, the questions buried behind her calm, the weight she hadn't put down yet. He reached her without saying a word and stopped inches from her shoulder. His voice was low. "He's stable. Still needs monitoring, but I think we caught it in time." Lara didn't respond right away. She turned slightly, just enough to face him. She searched his face for signs of judgment. There were none. Only focus, only calm. Only the same man who'd asked her years ago, "Are you sure?" and never questioned her answer since. Behind them, her mother lowered her head again. Donald placed a gentle hand on Lara's back. "Do you want me to stay?" he asked. She shook her head. "Go rest," she said. "I've got it from here." For the first time since they walked in, Lara stepped fully into the room, not as someone returning to beg, but as the woman they thought would break, standing tall and still choosing grace. Donald didn't hesitate. Once Lara confirmed her father's name and condition, he stepped in, directly, thoroughly, without blinking. No hesitation, no question. No pause to ask if it was awkward, no moment to weigh what had happened years ago. He reviewed the scans himself, met with the team, cross-checked vitals, then scrubbed in again just hours after his last operation. He didn't delegate this one. He didn't assign it to a junior team. He handled the case personally. "He doesn't cut corners," the nurse whispered to another. "He's treating him like any other very important person," someone else noted. "No, he's treating him like family," another replied. Lara stood just outside the glass hallway, watching Donald from a distance. Even in blue scrubs and exhaustion, he moved with precision. Calm, confidence. She'd watched him work before, but never like this. Never with someone from her life on the other side of his care. He didn't treat her father like the man who once doubted him. He treated him like a patient whose life mattered. That was all. That was everything. The man her family had feared, who they swore would abandon her once the shine wore off, was now saving the very man who told her not to come back. Without condition, without show, without needing to be asked. Lara didn't take over. She didn't argue for control or expect thanks. She just helped. She stayed close, made sure her mother had water, that her siblings didn't get lost in hospital corridors. She fielded questions when the team came in to debrief, translating terms into language her family could understand. But she didn't make speeches. She didn't explain herself. Her pain was stitched tight into her posture. Straight back, careful words, calm voice. But inside, every hour felt like reopening a door she thought she'd locked for good. She saw the way her mother looked at her now, with sorrow, not superiority. She noticed how her brother couldn't look her in the eye for more than a few seconds. Her sister stayed busy with tasks that didn't need doing. No one knew how to act around the person they'd erased. Lara didn't force them to. She helped because she could, because it was right, because Donald didn't carry bitterness, and neither would she, not outwardly. But that didn't mean she didn't remember. The cost still sat in her chest like weight. The silence still echoed in the way no one had called in years. The old words still stung, even as she adjusted her father's blanket and nodded at the nurse. Grace isn't always loud. Sometimes it's just doing the next right thing without asking if anyone's ready to see it. Her family watched the man they feared become the man they didn't know how to thank. Donald never boasted. He didn't hover. He came in with charts, gave updates, and checked vitals with the same focus he gave everyone else. But he made sure their father had the best. Private room, close monitoring, specialist follow-ups scheduled automatically. He addressed their mother as Mum with the same respect he used for hospital board members. He spoke gently to Lara's younger sister, letting her ask questions without making her feel small. When her brother nervously offered to help carry a tray, Donald accepted it with a nod, no tension in his voice. It unsettled them. Not because he was rude, but because he wasn't. Not because he was distant, but because he wasn't. He didn't meet them with resentment. He met them with grace they hadn't earned. Her uncle, who'd once said Donald would never respect black culture, leaned into the hallway and whispered to another family member, "He runs this place, and you'd never know it." That was the part that broke something inside them. Their biggest fear hadn't been that he would hurt Lara. It was that he'd prove they were wrong about everything. And he was. Her father opened his eyes on the third day. It was slow, uneven, but clear. Lara was the first to see it. She stepped closer, careful not to startle him. He blinked twice, then shifted his head toward her. Recognition passed between them, brief and heavy. He didn't speak, not yet, but his fingers twitched slightly against the blanket. Donald came in a few minutes later, checked the monitors, made a small adjustment to the 4 drip, and gave a quiet update. He's doing better than expected. Her mother exhaled, loud and shaky. Her siblings sat back in their chairs, silent. And in that silence, none of them knew what to say. They'd expected to see Lara broken, lost, forgotten. Instead, they saw a woman who moved through pain without bitterness, who helped them without needing to be asked, who stood in the very life they once told her would betray her and chose not to betray them. Her father's chest rose and fell with ease now. Donald left the room without lingering, and Lara stayed behind, not waiting for applause, not demanding an apology, just making sure the man who once shut her out had someone near when he woke. That's what love does. Not because it forgets the past, but because it refuses to become it. They asked to see her privately. It wasn't a request with weight. It didn't come with expectations. It came with the posture of people who no longer stood above her, who no longer believed they had the right to. Lara led them to one of the consultation rooms near the waiting area, small, quiet, with a single window letting in late afternoon light. She closed the door behind them, then stood by the wall, arms crossed gently over her chest. Her mother sat first. Her siblings followed, close behind. Her brother didn't meet her gaze. Her sister looked at her as if searching for the girl she used to share a room with. No one raised their voice. No one cried loud. No theatrics. Then, without a word, her mother lowered herself to the floor. Her knees touched the tile. Her back curved forward, not from age, but from weight she had never set down. Her brother followed. So did her sister. Lara stayed still. Her mother spoke first, voice raw. We were wrong. She didn't rush the words. She let each one fall. We were afraid, and we let that fear decide everything. She looked up slowly. You didn't just survive without us. You built a life we didn't believe could exist. Her mother's eyes shined, but no tears fell this time. We owe you more than this room. But this is where we'll start. Lara didn't respond right away, because in her mind, the years they'd missed unraveled in fragments, quiet, steady, unforgiving. She remembered cold winter nights in their first apartment when Donald worked double shifts, and she stayed up wondering if the radiator would hold. She remembered that one moment in the kitchen when he looked at her and said, "I'm trying, but I don't know if I'm enough," and how she held his face and whispered, "You're more than enough." She remembered making phone calls for job interviews with no support, no encouragement, only a silent wall from the people who once said they'd raised her to be strong. She remembered how it felt to carry good news with no one to share it with, when she got her first leadership role at the clinic, when her first article got published, when she came home to an empty voicemail inbox and still smiled for her husband anyway. She remembered every family gathering she didn't attend, every wedding invitation she didn't receive, every photo she saw online of cousins reuniting without her name ever being mentioned. They didn't just leave her, they erased her. And yet, here she stood, grown from the very soil that once tried to bury her ambition. Lara stepped forward, slowly. "You didn't just reject my husband," she said, voice even. Her mother looked up. "You rejected me." The room was still. "You told me I wasn't worth choosing, that my happiness wasn't real, that his love couldn't last. You looked me in the face and said, 'If you leave, don't come back.' And I didn't." Her tone didn't rise. She didn't need volume. The weight was in her steadiness. "I made peace with the silence. I didn't wait for this moment. I learned how to live without it." Her sister sniffed quietly. Her brother blinked fast, ashamed. "I'm not here because I need anything from you," Lara added. "I'm here because the man you doubted, without ever really knowing, chose to help you anyway, without being asked, without being owed." She looked at each of them. "I am proud of who I became, not in spite of you, but because I had no choice but to grow past what you refused to accept." Then she exhaled. "But I'm not angry," and she meant it. She was tired. She was healed enough not to bleed on them anymore. But she wasn't going to pretend their absence didn't cost her something real. Her mother stayed on her knees. "You don't have to forgive us," she said. "I know." Lara looked out the window. The sky was soft, tinged orange. "I don't have an answer for you today. she continued. "I can't hand over forgiveness like a handshake. That's not how healing works. Forgiveness is something I'll grow into, not something I'll perform." Her mother nodded slowly. "I want boundaries," Lara said. "Real ones. You don't get to re-enter the easy parts of my life without understanding the parts you missed." Her mother's hands folded gently in her lap. "We understand. I believe you want to," Lara replied. "And that's a start." There was no hugging, no collapsing into arms, no overnight reunion. They left that room the same way they entered, quietly. But something had shifted. Not everything was fixed, but truth had finally been spoken. And truth, when met with dignity, always has a chance to build something again. What does forgiveness mean to you? Have you ever had to decide whether silence deserved another chance? Comment below. Like this video if you believe healing doesn't always come with a handshake. Subscribe to Mr. Victor Store Time for more stories of grace, growth, and second chances. Lara hadn't walked those fields in years. Now she stood at the edge of them again, the gravel crunching beneath her boots, the breeze carrying a hint of the scent that used to wake her before alarm clocks did, fresh grass, soil, and something only people from the land could name. Donald walked beside her, silent but present. He didn't comment on the long stretch of road, or the old barn sagging under its age. He didn't mention the house's faded paint, or the way the porch light flickered, unsure whether to stay on or off. He held her hand. That was enough. Her family had invited her back. Not with fanfare, not with promises, just a simple message: "We'd like to have you home for the weekend. If you're willing." Willing didn't mean healed, but it meant open. When they arrived, her brother opened the door first. His eyes searched hers for permission before he spoke. "Come in." Her mother had cooked, same dishes as before, but smaller portions. Her father was sitting now, stronger, but not fully recovered. He nodded at Donald when they entered. No words yet. But the nod mattered. Lara didn't feel like the outsider this time. She felt like someone returning on her own terms, and that made all the difference. The change wasn't dramatic. It was subtle, but real. Her name was spoken with softness now, no longer laced with tension. Her mother asked her questions she hadn't dared to ask in years: what she was working on, how her last speaking engagement went, if she liked where she lived. No one interrupted her answers. Donald, too, was treated differently. Her uncle, once suspicious, now sat next to him during breakfast and asked about healthcare reform. Her brother helped him load supplies into the trunk without needing to be asked. Still, the scars didn't vanish. When laughter got too loud, it sometimes fell quiet again too quickly, memories interrupting the moment. When Lara stepped into her childhood room and saw nothing had changed, she didn't cry, but she felt it in her throat. At dinner, her cousin hesitated before asking, "Do you think you'll come back more often?" Lara looked at her father, then at the table. "I'll come back when it feels like home," she said gently. No one corrected her, because rebuilding isn't about forgetting the storm. It's about choosing to stand on ground that once split open and still deciding to plant something. A few weeks after the visit, the local clinic received a donation. It wasn't publicized, no announcement, no ribbon cutting, just a quiet wire transfer from a private source that covered 6 months of salaries, equipment upgrades and funds to reopen their transportation program for patients in remote areas. The clinic director was stunned. She called Lara, assuming she knew something. Lara didn't, but she had an idea. That evening, after dinner, she looked across the table at Donald. "You did it, didn't you?" she asked. He didn't deny it. "They needed help," he said. "And I had the means. You didn't even put your name on it." He shrugged. "That's not why I did it." Lara looked at him for a long moment. She remembered all the fears her family once had, that he'd be arrogant, self-serving, above them. They never expected humility to look like quiet generosity. She reached across the table, took his hand. "Thank you," she said. "Not just for doing it, but for not needing credit." He smiled. "You already give me more than enough." The reunion wasn't a party. It wasn't a photo op. It was a backyard table, a grill, 3 generations under string lights that flickered when the wind shifted. Lara sat with a plate balanced on her lap, listening to her niece explain her college plans. Her cousin passed her lemonade. Her father sat nearby, Kane resting at his side, watching his family, not controlling, just observing. He caught her gaze and lifted his cup slightly. She nodded. Later that night, someone pulled out an old photo album. Lara flipped through it with her younger sister, laughing at hairstyles, old church clothes, and the time their uncle tried to deep-fry catfish in the rain. The warmth was real. But Lara didn't confuse it with full healing. She still had boundaries. She still had her own home, her own pace, her own way of loving from a distance that respected her journey. But this gathering, this moment, was something she hadn't expected. Her family wasn't perfect, but they were learning, and Lara no longer felt like she had to defend who she became. That was the table she returned to, one rebuilt by truth, not guilt. It didn't happen all at once, but little by little, Lara's parents stopped seeing Donald as the wealthy doctor their daughter married, and started seeing him for who he'd always been. Steady, humble, loyal. It was the way he always greeted her mother with a slight bow of his head, the way he made sure her father's medication was delivered in full every month without ever attaching his name to the order, the way he repaired the porch steps quietly one weekend without waiting to be thanked. He never pushed to be included. He simply showed up. Lara's father noticed. One morning, while sitting on the porch with Donald after breakfast, he said something he hadn't before. "You didn't need to come back here." "But you did." Donald looked at him. "Lara did first. I just followed her lead." Her father nodded slowly. "He didn't say I was wrong. He didn't need to." That moment was enough. Later that evening, her mother handed Lara a photo from her childhood, one where she was standing in the yard with mud on her shoes and a book in her hand. "You were always this girl," she said softly. "We just didn't know how to see it." Lara didn't stop at returning. She started building. She worked with a nearby non-profit to launch a health outreach program in the county. She organized monthly clinics where local families could receive checkups, medications, and health education without needing to travel for hours. She tapped into her networks, not for prestige, but for resources. The same people who once doubted her now showed up with their children, nodding respectfully as she handed them flyers. She also brought in mental health counselors to visit the high school monthly, funded a transportation shuttle for elderly patients, and helped revive the community garden that had been abandoned for nearly 5 years. She never put her name on any of it, but people knew. They saw her at work, not directing from afar, not arriving for ribbon cuttings. She stacked boxes, cleaned up after events, and held space for others to be seen. Her old teachers reached out. Her childhood friends volunteered. Her aunts came to support, still unsure how to say "I'm sorry," but ready to stand beside her anyway. And through all of it, Lara never once said, "This is because of you." Because it wasn't. It was for the little girls in town who still read books under the covers. It was for the boys whose grandmothers cut pills in half to make them last. It was for the future that didn't need permission to exist. Lara's cousins no longer talked about Donald when they introduced her in town. They talked about her. She's the one who brought the clinic van. She's the reason the mentorship program's still running. She got the grant for the school counseling. When they spoke of her now, there was no comparison to her husband. No need to prop her up by proximity. She had become her own pillar. At a youth career event hosted by the county, her younger cousin Jada whispered to a friend, "That's my cousin. She runs real things." Lara overheard. She didn't interrupt. She just smiled and returned to helping set up chairs. Respect didn't arrive overnight. But now, it didn't come as an afterthought either. She was no longer the girl who married up. She was the woman who built something, and chose a partner who supported her while she did. Donald noticed it too. At one event, while they were leaving, he leaned in and said, "They see you now." Lara smiled. "I think I finally see myself." Peace didn't come from the apologies. It came from knowing she didn't need them to move forward. It came in the mornings she woke up without anger, in the way she no longer rehearsed conversations that never happened, in the way she could stand in her childhood kitchen, stirring tea, and feel warmth, not ache. Her relationship with her family wasn't perfect, but it was honest now. She said no when she needed to. She didn't explain her boundaries. She didn't revisit the past unless it served healing. One afternoon, her mother asked if she'd be visiting again next month. Lara answered, "We'll see how the month goes," not to punish, but to protect her rhythm. Her growth no longer required their validation, but their presence, when peaceful, was welcome. That was peace, not a reunion fueled by guilt, but a reconnection held up by mutual growth. And Lara, daughter, wife, leader, survivor, had earned it. Have you ever had to forgive people who once broke you? Have you ever outgrown what tried to contain you? Share your thoughts in the comments. Like this story if you believe love is action, not noise. The stage wasn't extravagant. The room wasn't massive, but it was full. Health professionals, advocates, policy leaders, students and organizers filled the seats with quiet reverence. The event was the annual statewide Health Equity Summit, and this year's closing speaker was a name that had slowly built weight far beyond her county lines. Lara Matthew Stewart. She stood at the podium in a navy blue blazer and soft curls, her voice steady, her presence commanding without force. Donald sat near the front, his hands folded, his eyes locked on her, not because of the crowd, but because he'd watched her build the message she was about to deliver. Lara spoke without notes. She didn't read her story. She told it, not in detail, not with names, but with enough truth for anyone paying attention to feel the quiet battles behind every sentence. She talked about the gaps, rural gaps, racial gaps, policy gaps. She talked about what it meant to walk into rooms that didn't expect you, and to still do the work with your head held high. She talked about how health wasn't just access to doctors, but dignity. And she ended not with applause in mind, but with clarity. If we don't build systems that see the invisible, we'll keep creating outcomes that are avoidable. And that's not medicine. That's neglect. As she stepped down from the stage, the applause was full but respectful, like people knew she wasn't interested in fanfare. Donald stood as she returned to her seat. He didn't kiss her. He simply reached for her hand and gave it a squeeze. That gesture, that presence, it said more than words. But Lara wasn't done. As she walked through the hallway after the session, she saw them. Her parents stood near the exit, slightly apart from the crowd, wearing formal clothes that looked chosen with care. Her mother reached first. She pulled Lara into a hug that wasn't rushed, wasn't hesitant. It was light, but firm. When she pulled back, her voice cracked just enough to break open the truth. "You became everything we tried to keep you from." Lara didn't flinch. She smiled, not bitter, not smug, just grown. Her father nodded behind her mother, eyes red but proud. They didn't ask for more. They didn't apologize again. And Lara didn't need them to. That night, Lara walked alone for a moment. She had returned to the town earlier that week to attend a small planning session for one of her outreach programs. Instead of staying in the city hotel, she stayed at a guest house not far from the land she once called home. After dinner, she took a slow walk toward the edge of her family's old fields. The earth looked different now, less vibrant than in her childhood, but still standing. The fence she used to lean on was still there, though it leaned slightly now, just like the people who once raised her. She stood quietly for a moment, watching the wind bend tall grass. There was no soundtrack to it, no grand closure, just stillness. She wasn't returning as the girl who left. She wasn't returning as the daughter who needed proof she was loved. She wasn't returning to fix anything. She was here because she wanted to see if peace could grow in a place where pain once lived. And as she turned to walk back, she didn't look over her shoulder, because she wasn't going backward. She was walking forward, still loving, but not smaller. Some people won't understand you until you succeed. Others won't respect your choices until your choices outlive their doubt. That's fine, because healing doesn't need a crowd. It only needs truth. And sometimes the loudest proof of your strength is what you don't say, what you don't chase, what you grow in silence. I didn't go back to beg for love. I let love come back when it was ready to grow. And that's the difference between proving people wrong and simply proving to yourself that you were never wrong to begin with. To anyone who's ever had to walk away from the people they love, not out of pride but out of protection, this story is yours too. You don't owe anyone your silence. You don't owe anyone your undoing. What you owe yourself is the freedom to become, fully, freely, and without apology.